Which do you see? Maybe somewhere in the middle? Somewhere beyond? We have another great achievement to pause and look at here. This is the dual crewed mission. This is not two people in one spacecraft, but two spacecrafts, each with one person inside, in space purposely at the same time. This occurred in August of 1962. The U.S. was still working on their Mercury program, which is one person. Did they launch two Mercury capsules simultaneously? This goes to the Soviet Union. Vostok 3 and 4, the first time two ships in space simultaneously. So we're going to mark that one for the Soviet Union. It's a memorandum for the Vice President of the United States at this time, which was Lyndon B. Johnson. In accordance with our conversation, I'd like for you as Chairman of the Space Council to be in charge of making an overall survey of where we stand in space. Do we have a chance of beating the Soviets by putting a lab in space, or a trip around the moon, or by a rocket to land on the moon, or by rocket to go to the moon and back with the man? Is there any other space program which promises dramatic results in which we could win? How much additional would it cost? Are we working 24 hours a day on existing programs? If not, why not? If not, will you make recommendations to me as to how work can be speeded up? In building large boosters, should we put out emphasis on nuclear, chemical, or liquid fuel, or a combination of these? Are we making maximum effort? Are we achieving necessary results? This was something of concern by our government because there were so many check marks going the way of the Soviets, which the administration felt was uncomfortable and really wanted to show that we were a strength to be reckoned with as well, technologically, and for the advent of space exploration. So, which of these options do you think we went for? Many of you probably know, thanks to President Kennedy's speech. The clips I've spliced aren't from the State of the Union address, but from the time September 62. As you can see, President Kennedy was addressing a large gathering at Rice Stadium in Texas. We're very well known for their football. And I always like to point out that if I'd have been attending school, listening to a similar presentation like this, and the Soviet Union flag had been placed above the U.S. flag, that teacher probably would have most certainly been reprimanded or maybe even fired during the time of the Cold War for that. Let's watch this first clip.
It is one of the great adventures of all time, and no nation which expects to be the leader of other nations can expect to stay behind in this race for space.
This was the time that the term space for race entered colloquial language. Before this, there wasn't really this outspoken race to space. There definitely was. We wanted to try and do things before the Soviets, but this right here was the moment when it was declared there's a race for space. And before we show you the second clip, I just want to point out I'm not trying to be unpatriotic here. It's just trying to demonstrate how far we have come since Cold War times, that this doesn't cause ruffled feathers when you should look at it. This next clip I'm sure you have heard in history classes or are aware of from documentaries and things that you have watched, but this shows what the administration chose as our response to the so far winning of this supposed space race with the Soviets. And here we go.
But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
So 4 things to highlight from that. 1, it's kind of sad how the football in the nation tends to get a lot more attention than possibly space explorations still today. And 2, the option was we're going to travel to the moon. The 3rd thing I want to mention is that we will do this by the end of the decade, which would be 1969, as the new decade would be 1970. And the 4th thing to point out in retrospect, at the time he's making this announcement, and more so with the State of Union address he made, this is a time where many of the products, metal alloys and things that were used to have us achieve this goal of going to the moon before the end of the decade, that they had not been invented at this time. So imagine being a NASA engineer listening to this speech and thinking, whoa, I've got about 8.5 years to make this happen. And just so you're aware, the moon is 250,000 miles away from planet Earth. Let's return to the Mercury program. We have Wally Schirra's mission, Sigma 7. Sigma is a symbol in mathematics for sum or total. Schirra chose this symbol for his mission as he wanted to emphasize the engineering feat that goes into space exploration and all the contributions and all the things that go into a space mission. And the sigma is a great symbol commonly used throughout engineering. Here is CC painting the Sigma 7 on Schirra's capsule and how it appeared after re-entry.
The astronaut must learn to tolerate the heating he encounters during his fall back into the atmosphere. These quartz tube lamps produce great heat. Among the astronauts, Walter Schirra is charged with the special problem of studying the capsule environment.
Isn't that crazy? What'd you do at work today? I sat in the oven, got cooked for research. He had a very successful mission, learned lots. This is the USS Kearsarge, and just off to the side here, unfortunately cut off from the photograph, we have our very own veteran. This is Machine Mate First Class Norman Walker, otherwise also entitled as Owen Nielsen, our very own Riverhawk's grandfather. He was aboard this vessel and got to see Wally Schirra return from space. Neat opportunity. Okay, let's round up the last of the manned missions of the Mercury program. Here we have Cooper. And you want to make note, he was the first U.S. astronaut to spend over 24 hours in space. So he's the first U.S. astronaut to get nap time, get a full sleep in space. He chose the Faith 7, partially commenting on the confidence, faith that they have in their engineering team and their peers to make the mission successful. Think about, if you're seated in a chair right now, think about being in a space not too much bigger than what your arms can reach around you and being in that space for 34 hours. Remarkable. Cece had moved to California, so she wasn't available to paint on as tradition had come, the Faith 7. So one of the grounds crew people did that. Here's a nice little frame by frame, the launch of astronaut Cooper. This is showing going from sea level to 5,000 feet in 26 seconds. Good recovery. And I believe this is the USS Kearsarge again. And the Mercury outline here is actually formed by the Navy personnel. A nice welcome. After 34 hours in space, you would think that you would be very exhausted. He was very excited to boast that he had landed in the right zone, right on the old bazoo, into his ocean-specified landing spot. One of the things I like to think about this mission is what it would do to your body after 34 hours in such a confined space, and a warm space as well. He lost 7 pounds in 37.5 hours. Most certainly not the healthiest way to incur such drastic weight loss. Here he is, getting the red carpet treatment. And these are your 6 missions that launched the first U.S. astronauts, known as the Mercury 7. And these are the first 2 Redstone rockets. Of course, this would be Alan Shepard and Gus Grissom. And then these were orbital flights. These were aboard the Atlas, so they needed to be bigger rockets, but the Mercury capsule's the same. And you might be thinking, we keep saying Mercury 7, yet there were only 6 manned missions. And that is because the gentleman here, Deke Slayton, you want to jot down his name. Deke Slayton was as much a part of the Mercury 7 as any other of the 7. Unfortunately, during those extreme medical and physical tests that the Mercury astronauts experienced, it was found that he had a slight heart defibrillation, kind of maybe like we might think in terms of a heart murmur. And so he was grounded from his Mercury space flight, but still was incredibly involved with the Mercury 7 crew and all the crews of astronauts, as he later becomes the chief of the astronauts, the individual who's going to assign who goes to what mission. So he's very much an active member, and there was never a thought of not calling him the Mercury 7, as they all went through this training and experience together. In the Seattle Air and Space Museum in Washington State, there is one of Deke Slayton's flight suits on display, as well as a medal that he received for his service to NASA, and one of his notebooks. This is probably one of the most iconic images of the Mercury 7. Fun little story behind this photograph, besides the fact that they don't have their matching boots on, is how the photograph came to be. Near the wrap-up of the Mercury program, they realized, they being people in PR, realized they didn't have a group photo of the Mercury 7 in their very famous Mercury 7 suits. And so they all were called up very quickly to come in and get suited up for this photograph. Here's fun little background scenes of them getting suited up for this very, very famous image now of the Mercury 7. There we go. What, are you nuts? I'm not an astronaut. This is from Space Chimps. Are you wearing aluminum clothes? Yeah. There you go. Astronaut. Alright, let's have some fun and see if you can recognize people by just a mere glimpse of their eyes and nose and mouth. These are your Mercury 7. We have Alan Shepard, Gus Grissom, John Glenn, Scott Carpenter, Wally Schirra, Gordon Cooper, and Deke Slayton. That's our awesome Mercury 7. Mercury capsule, a very basic look at the capsule. Spaceship design. When building a spaceship, the tiniest details are crucial. For example, this spaceship may be flawed because it has a giant hole in the side. This would be an awesome memento of the Mercury program, having all the astronauts' autographs. There is a memorial at the site of many of the Mercury launches of the Mercury 7 there, emblem. And one thing to point out before we move on to the next space program for NASA is that these patches that I've shown you, except for the NASA patch here, these are actually all souvenir patches in the sense that they were designed and manufactured after the missions. It hadn't yet become a tradition within NASA to create a specific mission patch. So all souvenir patches and all the astronauts commented on how they did like their mission patches that were created. So space patches, not yet a thing in the world of space exploration for the United States. And so far, at this point in time, 53 hours, 55 minutes, and 27 seconds, the U.S. has been spacebound.